Hey, all, glad you're here. Last week, as I shared my podcast, I had been struggling with feeling down. And as my mental and emotional health declined, I knew there were lessons that I could learn and eventually share about this experience. I feel like part of the reason this happened was to understand and empathize with my family. I have also friends and clients who have suffered or are suffering from depression. And I just got a small taste of what that must feel like. I am no expert on depression, but I shared last week that allowing and processing emotion has helped me to deal with issues that might be part of the cause. Besides that, there are other things that have made a difference. When I was having the hardest time in my marriage, and was led to life coaching principles as a guide to keep my marriage together. One of the very first principles that I implemented was self-care. I had no idea how important this step was in my healing. I didn't believe it would make as big a difference as it did. Self care really helped me. It was such a foreign concept for me when I first learned it. I did lots of soul searching to make sure it was a true principle, that it was right, that it was okay. I had interpreted many gospel teachings in such a way that self care seemed wrong. My perception was that service and selflessness were always the answer. After years, I wore myself out, wifing and mothering and doing my callings and always searching for opportunities to do good and never taking time for myself, even when I was having a really difficult time. What I came to understand was that in order to effectively take care of others, I had to make myself a priority too. Although every part of me resisted this new way of thinking, it made sense. Giving myself permission to do self care was one of the best mindset shifts I made. It's not uncommon for clients to share that taking time to do self care feels selfish. Their to do lists never end, which may be things like cleaning, lunches, laundry, transporting, serving, work obligations, so many things. When I recently prayed and asked God what He felt would help me with my emotional state, I don't know why the answer came as a surprise. A part of my answer was to give myself a break. The very answer I had gotten years ago when I was so depressed in my marriage. I was told to do the bare minimum until I felt better. I was told to do something fun that would fill my spirit. I also got the impression to be still and trust in God. I was trying to run faster than I had strength. The message that came through powerfully was this: feeling depressed at times is part of life. It's going to happen. We can't escape it. We can't run from it. I didn't have to push through it expecting so much of myself, but instead to recognize where I was at and what my limits were. Be kind to myself, not run faster than I had strength. Read fluff, eat that piece of chocolate cake, not be so hard on myself. Feed my spirit and my body with happiness. There is nothing wrong with doing this. Another important point was not giving myself a guilt trip during or following whatever self care I did. I was also reminded that I need joy, variety, beauty, and purpose in my life, and all are equally valuable. It's really hard to just focus on purpose if you don't have the joy, the variety, and the beauty in your life, is what I've found. Quickly following these thoughts, I had a saying come to mind that I'd never heard anywhere. And you may have all heard it, but I hadn't heard it. It was, you can't pour from an empty cup. I find phrases or scriptures like this come to my mind, and they're often a way of God speaking to me. He will give me a phrase, and as I search that phrase on Google, I am led to a book to buy or read or information that will help. So when I Googled can't pour from an empty cup, an article came up that spoke to my heart, and it was the very first one that came up. And this is usually how it goes. The article was called Self Care 101, and it was written by a physician named Susan Hawes. She had found joy and meaning doing service missions in Guatemala, and she used her medical knowledge to help the people there. She did great work and was needed. She used her vacation time multiple times in a row to go on these trips. She just loved serving and blessing others. And then she started having physical symptoms and pain in her stomach that were really intense. She'd had another trip to Guatemala planned, and here are her words of what happened next. I started to wonder if going on the trip would be foolish. Not only was I not in good physical condition, but I was concerned about what might happen if things got worse while in rural Guatemala. It was an extremely hard decision to make, but after much prayer and conversation with trusted advisors, I backed out of the trip 3 days before I was scheduled to fly out. I felt so bad about it at first that I had nightmares and quickly discovered that I couldn't look at what my colleagues who were on the trip without me were posting from Guatemala. I ached to be there, but at the same time knew that I had made the right decision by staying home. Has this ever happened to you? That you have had to say no to something really, really good because it would have been foolish and even risky to go forward? Is there something in your life that you really want to do right now, but that if you're honest with yourself, you'll admit that right now you have no business doing it? After finally getting some tests done, it appeared that the abdominal pain had been nothing more than stress related indigestion. Yet I am so grateful that my body used it to tell me something was very wrong. As soon as I found myself in an unexpected staycation instead of being in Guatemala, I realized how exhausted and desperately in need of rest I actually was. So, a bit later in this article, she shared what she did to fill up her cup. She said, I've reconnected with my love of music, gone on all day hikes in the spectacular local nature, gone on laughter and music filled driving adventures with my guy, driving hours round trip just to watch the sunset in a particularly beautiful location, and started doing something I've wanted to do for ages, experimenting with plant based recipes. During my staycation, I suddenly had time for all these wonderful things, and they have infused my life ever since returning to my usual work routine, and I'm so grateful. So, after reading this entire article of this physician's story, my takeaway was that I was running faster than I had strength, and I needed to give myself permission to take a break, just like she had. This past couple of weeks, I'd been reminded of the lesson that God keeps teaching me. Self-care is not selfish. Self-care allows us to take care of others even better. Just as you would not expect your car to run continuously without filling up the gas tank or getting oil changes, you too cannot expect to run on empty indefinitely. Filling up your cup is essential. Running on empty eventually leads to a machine that no longer functions properly. I needed to stop, fill up my cup even more than just my morning routine, which has been a great self-care that I've had for years that really works. And it helped me to feel like I got God's permission to drop my to-do list until I recovered. I did the bare minimum. I spent one day up in the canyon alone. I hiked for hours that day. I soaked in the quiet and the calm. It renewed my spirit. I kept to the bare minimum for days until I felt lighter and happier. I feel so much better. Whatever you do, it should be fun. Self-defense is different than self-care. Self-defense is protective, like taking a drive to avoid confrontation. Self-care should be fun. It's fun. Do you know what type of self-care renews your spirit? If not, start to consider what might work, then try it and see if it does. Luckily, before this time, I've done lots of work prior to this on self-care. I've made lists of things that light me up and I've practiced them and I know which ones work best for me. It's easier to be proactive by doing self-care regularly than trying to dig yourself out of a hole from neglecting your needs, which I just did. Even with the best intentions, sometimes I am so busy shoulding myself that I find myself in a hole anyway. My shoulds this time had to do with coming off of a vacation. And I just kept thinking, if that's not self-care, then what is? That was fun. And I had all these shoulds about hopping right back into life and working really hard and trying to catch up. But those shouldn'ts can cause us issues because I was feeling so much negative emotion around everything I needed to get done. And I finally realized the most helpful thoughts were ones that allowed that emotion and helped me work through them instead of trying to push them away and pretend like I was just being ridiculous for needing self-care after a vacation. The second thing that's helped me besides self-care is to remember another truth I'd lost sight of. You know, those truths that they keep coming and going and you forget them and then you remember them again. Opposition is a stepping stone, not a roadblock. All is for my benefit and learning. And my friend taught it to me this way, we're leveling up every time that we have opposition. So think video game, right? It's happening so you can get further light, knowledge, and truth. And I found when I'm growing in a big way, it will be followed by opposition. Plan on it. I need to expect it instead of believing that I might be doing something wrong when I experience the opposition. This is the pattern for any disciple of Jesus Christ. I don't need to prevent myself from this happening again because it will. We will continue to experience opposition as we search for and work for greater light and knowledge. If I'm working towards a devoted life dedicated to serving Christ, I will face much opposition. That's what it looks like. Every person who recorded their lives in the scriptures faced much opposition. If I want the experiences they've had, I must experience a type of what they endured and overcame. Opposition is a law. It will be a law into the eternities. There will even be opposition in the millennium. There will be those who choose unbelief and disobedience and lifestyles contrary to Heavenly Father's laws. The desires of my heart is what is most important, and your heart, not how much we get done or how fast we accomplish it. How long it takes is irrelevant. What is relevant is that the desire is burning within us. So from this place, self-care is easier to understand and it's even possible to do. Timing is important, but it's not that important. Often I expect results quicker than when they actually come, and then frustration sets in. And I'm not understanding that the timing isn't crucial. What is crucial is that it happens at all in God's own timing, way, and according to his will. Being still, I've found, requires trusting in God's timing. His timing's always the right timing. He factors in all the bumps and bruises along the way. It really is already part of his plan. Mental health days are expected. This is not going to mess up his eternal plan, even if it looks messy. What would actually mess up the plan, I've found, is changing my righteous desires based on unrealistic expectations that I have made and created and not met for myself. Then I may change my belief or desire in the path set before me. I'm full of doubt and fear, and I want to give up. And then I'm not in line with the correct path for me. So do self-care with the end in mind that you're going to feel better and you're going to be able to do all these things that you want to do once you've taken care of yourself. Plan on opposition. Don't fight with reality. Then all will be as it should be. I don't need to veer from the path in an effort to escape the discomfort it presents. I don't need to overly concern myself with things being done quickly or on an unrealistic timeline I've created. I needn't put so much pressure on myself. This will hamper, not help my progress. The third thing that always helps me is dropping into gratitude. I think of 10 things right now in the present that I can be grateful for. On my hike, I did this. And here's an example of my thoughts. I have a car to drive. I'm not walking to the canyon. I have a healthy body. My heart is beating, my lungs and my heart are doing their jobs. My legs and arms are doing their jobs. I have air conditioning, or in some cases, heat. I have a husband. I have children. I have food to eat. I'm not going hungry. I have trees and mountains created for me, changing colors, perfect temperature, fresh air, sun shining. A community of people who care about me, help me, provide gas, food, roads, things that I don't have to create for myself. And I always, as I start just dipping into this gratitude, I have a better emotional state. It's a quick fix every time. It never does not work when I go looking for all of my blessings. I hope these ideas help you when you're battling with depression or just sadness. I'm learning to treat my mental, emotional symptoms as a red flag. I'm sure you probably have red flags for physical symptoms. I don't get headaches, but I have some friends and family members who do. And if they start to feel a headache coming on, they don't wait until it's a migraine. They always grab medication to stop the symptoms before they get worse. And even with your physical issues, you'll grab a Band-Aid, take medicine, lay down, drink fluids, etc., feel better. Think of your emotional state in that same way. Be aware of where you are mentally and emotionally, and then treat it deliberately before it gets worse. I'm grateful to say I'm feeling so much better. My friends and family have noticed, and I'm ready to get back on the horse. but maybe at a slower pace, taking in the scenery as I go. Life continues on. I'm thankful to have been reminded of concepts forgotten and the opportunity to learn some important new ones as well. As always, seek and expect miracles. Much of what I learned through this process came from Heavenly Father, who loves me and you. We will struggle in this life, and He knows that. He won't ever leave us alone. Jeffrey R. Holland says it best. In the gospel of Jesus Christ, you have help from both sides of the veil, and you must never forget that. When disappointment and discouragement strike, and they will, you remember and never forget that if our eyes could be opened, we would see horses and chariots of fire as far as the eye can see, riding at reckless speed to come to our protection. They will always be there, these armies of heaven, in defense of Abraham's seed. All right, guys, hope you have the best week, and we will see you next time.